Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And I love it. Promoter 101. Yeah, I love it. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And I love it. Promoter 101. Yeah, I love it. Promoter 101.
It's Barry Dickens from ITB, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Hey, you guys, come and get it.
Thanks, Rancher. Welcome to the 67th gathering of Promoter 101 The Podcast. I'm Dan Steinberg, and I'll guide you through the next hour of your day with my mate, Luke Pierce.
Hey, Dan, great to be back. We've got the mastermind behind Lava Records, former Atlantic Records and Capitol Music Group chief, and now Innocent Project founding board member, Mr. Jason Flom, stopping by the podcast for some time together. Plus, we're going to have APA's Andy Summers, that's the legendary agent to acts like Social Distortion, and Brian Wilson. Plus, a war story from DSW's Entertainment's David Simone, around to talk about his clients Wilson Phillips and the Piano Guys. Plus, Dan and I break down the news of the week. Dan, this is a solid podcast, if I do say so myself, and I certainly am at this time.
Hi, it's Steve Zapp from ITB International Talent Booking Agency. I'm on Promoter 101.
We're finishing up our world tour, but you can catch us live.
Coming up on Wednesday, February 7th, Promoter 101's own Dan Steinberg will be interviewing Live Nation CEO Michael Rapino at Polestar Touring Conference at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. If you have a question you'd like to ask the most powerful promoter in this business, tweet at us, email us, send us a message, and if it's good, Steiny will ask Rapino as part of the Q&A and credit you for your efforts.
For our international listeners, we are coming to the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington in London for the International Live Music Conference. That's ILMC. March 8th at 5 p.m., I'll be moderating Tales from the Frontline with manager Paul Crookford at ILMC. This is a fun session. It can't be recorded because everything in the room is all about tall tales and shit talking, and you can make it up as long as it's entertaining. It should be a good time with some of the biggest names in the industry. Looking forward to that one.
And if you're abroad or want to make the trip over there, you can still register for that conference at 30.ilmc.com. We've just learned the University of Massachusetts Lowell campus has added Promoter 101 to its required weekly listening in Professor Pete Lowley's class. So welcome, U of Mass students. Glad to have you listening to this podcast.
I believe that's the third or fourth campus that I know of that's added us to their required listening, and I think that's kind of awesome.
It's pretty cool.
Students, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got thoughts or questions, throw them out there. We want to hear what's going on, what you're thinking about, and what you're thinking about doing in the industry when you finally have to get one of them jobs to pay for that big, expensive college education. If you've got something on your chest that you want to talk about and share, feel free to reach out to me and Luke at Steiny at promoter101.net. Email's always great. You can tweet at us. You can hit us through Facebook Messenger. You can use smoke signals, or you can just nudge us at the bar.
In the meantime, keep up with us on Twitter. I'm at WLuke Pierce. Dan's at The Jew, and the show is at Promoters. That's Promoters plural 101.
Hi, my name's Ed Bicknell, and I'm Promoter 101, and I'm in room 24 something, and I've got an inside leg measurement of 32 inches and a cup size of 31A.
If you've missed any of our past podcasts, you can always catch up at promoter101.net. This week we feature a classic reissue of episode 24 featuring
Paradigm's Lee Anderson. That's the agent to Zed, to Skrillex, many more, talking about changing the game, the EDM world.
Also, AEG Presents UK. Toby Leighton Pope shares his view of the industry, talking about the guy that's in charge of AEG for London and the greater part of the UK.
Plus, we sat down with RCA's Nick Light, South by Southwest last year.
And a drop-in by Green Copper's Jeff Goodman. They are changing the game as far as apps go and have some of the best festivals in the world working through them. And he'll give us a picture of that.
If you haven't already, don't you think it's about time you actually subscribe to Promoter 101? It's not like this costs you anything. It's totally free. Helps us a little bit here. So subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you podcast.
Technically, I imagine business professors would say that there's an opportunity cost by listening to the podcast. So it does cost you something.
I suppose it would. But here, Dan, an economist will ask you, what is the greater opportunity cost of not listening to Promoter 101?
Eche!
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli.
Addie Ann Tarleton.
Paul Lord.
Phil Rodriguez.
Rick Greenstein.
Donatas Nachayos.
Rob Pellet. Rich Mills. Sasha Bombaji.
Seth Hurwitz. Steve Martin.
Whitney Bond.
This is Trip Brown.
Wayne Forte.
Steve Zapp.
Trevor Solomon.
Live on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
It's time for the news of the week. And Dan, it's Grammy weekend. I'm sure the champagne's going to be popping in New York this weekend. And before we get into the news, do you have any predictions for the big four? That's record, album, song of the year, and new artist.
I predict hip-hop artists are going to win this stuff.
That's about right, Dan, except hip-hop artists I think are going to be competing against each other. So I'm certainly rooting for Despacito to win in record. Awaken My Love, that's Childish Gambino's an album, although I think 24 Karat Magic by Bruno Mars is going to win with Kendrick and Jay-Z splitting up those hip-hop votes you talked about. Rooting for Issues by Julia Michaels for Song of the Year and Alicia Cara for Best New Artist. Looking forward to some amazing performances this weekend. You can tune into the Grammys on CBS on Sunday night.
So AEG is expanding by opening up an office in France. Seemingly, they are on the grow and in the go once again internationally. AEG presents.
We picked up some interesting news from Polestar this week that TPG, that's the majority owner of creative artist agency CA, is going to be investing in the African music business. They bought into Trace, which is an Afro-urban entertainment group active in live music, TV, radio, and more throughout the entire continent. This is an interesting first foray into Africa, which is obviously a very developing market when it comes to recorded music, and an interesting sign for the institutions that might follow behind. We'll have to keep an eye on it.
Pearl Jam's announced a handful of baseball stadium dates, including their hometown of Seattle, Missoula, Boston, and they're going to hit Wrigley for 2 nights as well.
We're going to give a shout out to our buddy Dave Brooks from Amplify Magazine and Billboard Magazine for giving Promoter 101 the Amplify Best Success Story Award this past week. We're deeply honored to get the continued support from Dave and everybody over at Amplify and Billboard. Thanks for the nod here. We really appreciate it.
It's a really nice piece he wrote about us. It really touched me. It was very kind of him.
I sent him a very nice text afterwards. It was very, very kind. We appreciate the recognition.
This is Andrea Johnson from ICM Partners, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
And finally, we'd like to take a moment to shine a spotlight on our badass of the week, ICM Partners, Meg White. She is on the front line of breaking some of the hottest acts in the business, making her this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Congratulations, Megan.
Hi, this is Stuart Galbraith. I'm the CEO at Kilimanjaro, and I'm on Promoter 101.
If you haven't heard of Jason Flom, you certainly should. He's the man who founded Lava Records in the early 90s, went on to become the CEO of Atlantic Records, working with artists like Skid Row, Tori Amos, Kid Rock, Matchbox 20, Haley Williams, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He was also the head of Capitol Music Group, working with the likes of Katy Perry, Coldplay, and Lenny Kravitz. 2009, he reclaimed Lava Records, which he launched in the early 90s as a joint venture with Atlantic Records and has since then signed acts like Lorde and Jessie J. Today, he's a founding member of the Innocence Project, dedicated to fighting social injustices around the world. Please welcome to the podcast, Lava Records CEO, Mr. Jason Flom.
Joined by an icon in the record business, Jason Flom. It's good to have you here.
Jesus Christ, icon. That's a good word. I like that. I'm going to keep that. I might put that on my business cards. You know what I mean? Fuck chairman and CEO. I'm an icon now. Good. All right. Thanks.
Right off the bat, man, one of the most cool things in the world is the iconic picture of Kanye and Taylor and you at the awards.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's so great. Yeah, a classic photobomb if there ever was one.
That's fucking awesome.
I've had some little brushes with destiny like that, or whatever you want to call them, and it's always fun. You know, one time I was at the MTV Awards, and it was really sort of disorganized. I think it was at Staples. And I was walking backstage. I don't remember where I was going, but I walked right through a live interview with Tyler, the Creator, on MTV, which was like, everyone was looking at me like, but it was all just like a sort of a clusterfuck.
Yeah, it's not your only extracurriculars. Like, your hobbies outside of the business are well documented for civil rights and the murder trials. Can you talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, for a college dropout, I'm a pretty good lawyer and social worker. You know, I've been working in criminal justice reform for 25 years. My basic shtick is I've been committed, and I always will be, to ending mass incarceration, decriminalizing drugs that shouldn't be criminalized in the first place, eliminating mandatory sentences. Mandatory sentencing laws are a uniquely American fucking tragedy, and basically getting people out of prison who don't belong there. And so that all led to my hosting my own podcast, which is called Wrongful Conviction. And it's been a great really exciting process. It's based on my work with the Innocence Project. I'm the founding board member of the Innocence Project, and I've been there for almost 25 years. So on my podcast, I interview people who served decades in prison or even been sentenced to death for crimes they did not commit. Like, they're actually innocent of the crimes. It's an amazing experience for me. I feel really lucky to be able to do it.
What made you turn to such a just cause?
You know, it's a crazy story, and it does seem odd because I don't have any personal experience, knock wood, with the criminal justice system. But it happened because I read a story in the newspaper in 1992 about a kid named Stephen Lennon who was serving 15 years to life for a nonviolent first offense cocaine possession charge in New York State and in maximum security prison. And the reason it was in the newspaper was because his mother had been trying to get the Governor Cuomo, the first Governor Cuomo, to grant clemency. She had gotten letters from the judge, the warden. She'd even got a letter from Geraldine Ferraro, who some of the listeners are too young to remember, but she was the first woman that was ever nominated to be vice president. Pretty incredible that she was able to do this, considering she was just a homemaker from upstate New York. But Cuomo had turned her down. So this is why it was in the newspaper. Cuomo denies Ferraro bid for drug parole, something like that. And I was like, you know, this has two things that fascinate me, prison and drugs. So I read it with great interest, and I decided I had to do something. It just blew my mind. I didn't realize that you could be sentenced to 15 years to life for a nonviolent first offense. It made no sense to me. And long story short, I ended up getting a lawyer, Bob Colina, who represented my rock stars when they used to get in trouble. My rock stars, whatever rock stars that were signed to me when they would get in trouble. And at the time, I had Stone Temple Pilots and Skid Row, and they were getting arrested twice a week. So I had him on speed dial, and I asked him to help, and he agreed to take the case pro bono. 5 months later, we ended up in a courtroom in Malone, New York, and I sat there holding Mrs. Lennon's hand as the judge ruled in our favor and her son was freed. And I said, you know what? That's the best fucking thing I've ever experienced. And I was hooked.
You used your power in the industry for good, for no other reason than it just interested you and you just saw a wrong that you thought you could right.
Yeah, I've always had, you know, I really got it from my dad, a very strong sense of, I guess, ethics. And he gave my brother and I some great advice. You know, he said, do whatever you want to do. Try to be the best at it, but just make the world a better place. He said, if you do that, that's the meaning of success. And I always wanted to do that. And I always also had this thing about helping the helpless. Like, if it's an animal or a person or a thing that's in an impossible situation, I can easily project myself into that situation and say, I would want someone to help me. So why wouldn't I help them? And, you know, I'm not a religious person. I'm actually fervently irreligious. But I know right from wrong.
But you grew up in the temple, right?
My parents were very reformed. You know, they raised us.
But you were bar mitzvahed, right?
I was bar mitzvahed, yeah. It was, it was all transliterated. I never learned.
You memorized? You didn't learn it?
Yeah, I memorized, and it's fine. I mean,
guilty.
I'm proud to be Jewish, but for me, the organized religion plays no role in my life.
It just occurred to me that some of those bonds have probably matured. I mean, it's been a while since I turned 13, so you should probably check on that.
One of the things I got from my bar mitzvah, I still remember this, was Sly and the Family Stone Fresh.
Wow.
Remember that album? Yeah. Fucking sick. If you want me to stay, I'll be around. I mean, that guy was not only a ridiculous genius, but also like a total rock star. I mean, Sly was a rock star of the 20th order. And I was lucky to see him live a couple times. And, you know, when I was a kid, it was fucking awesome.
Well, let's talk about that. We're at your bar mitzvah. So let's talk about your early days and how you got into the industry. And let's talk about the path.
Yeah. You know, I failed into the industry. I failed at being a rock star, you know.
You played?
Yeah, I played guitar and wrote songs and stuff. And I didn't want to go to college. I was smoking a lot of weed back then and got into gambling. I used to go to the racetrack a lot. I cut school one year I cut school 64 times. I don't know how I got away with it, but I did. And somehow or other still graduated from high school. I didn't make the sports teams because I'm slow. I'm coordinated, so I can kick ass at ping pong, but I'm slow. So I decided to play guitar instead. And the crazy thing was, I didn't want to go to college. And this was not a very popular thing in my house, considering, you know, my dad graduated from Harvard Law School and my mom graduated Cornell when she was 18 years old.
So education was valued in your home.
Yeah, you could say that. And so my dad made me a deal. He gave me a year to become a rock star. Otherwise, I had to go back to school. And my mom vetoed the deal. My mom, who had never cursed in her life until that day, She apparently said, bullshit. If he's going to live in my house, he has to work or go to school. So my dad, the great negotiator, because my dad was, one of the greatest negotiators of the 20th century. And that's not hyperbole. There's a chapter in Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers about him called The 3 Lessons of Joe Flom.
That's your dad. I read that. I didn't.
Yeah, that was my dad. So the great negotiator had to come see his fucked up son and figure out a way to undo this deal that he had just done. And so he made some calls, and it turned out he had a friend who knew somebody at Warner Communications. So he got me an interview there. I walked into this interview. I smoked 2 joints. So I walked in, and the guy goes, you're going to work at Atlantic Records. And I got a trainee position at Atlantic Records, making $4 an hour. I'll show you how old I am. It was July 31st, 1979. I'll never forget. And, they gave me some double-sided tape and a staple gun and a bunch of Led Zeppelin posters, and off I went into the stores. So there were record stores back then. Many of you are old enough to remember what record stores were.
So that was the compromise, huh?
That was the compromise. And as soon as I got there, I fell in love with the music business. But it was funny because I never thought about record companies. As a kid who would listen to records all the time and go to shows and played the guitar, and I never really thought about where they're made or how it even happens. I don't know why, but then I got to a record, I was like, holy fuck, this is incredible.
You were at the labels when they controlled the industry. Talk about the greatest couple of decades where record labels truly controlled the industry on every level. They could set the tone, and whether they were supporting an album or not meant whether the album had a chance or not. Clearly not the day that we're currently in, and you've lived through that evolution.
Yeah, I mean, as much as what you're saying has a lot of truth to it, I've always believed that, records have magic in them, right? They have degrees of magic. Anywhere from 0 to 10. And what I mean by that is a 0 is a record that you could play on the radio all day, every day, and nobody would buy it or care. And a 10 is I Will Always Love You, right? Or My Sharona, or pick one. Like a song that as soon as it goes on the radio, and I've been lucky to have some of those songs, or as soon as anybody hears it, they have to fucking buy it. They have to tell all their friends about it, and it just goes fucking nuts, right? And what I mean by that is every week there's a number one record, but they're not all number one records are created equal either.
So Royal was one of those songs.
Royals is one of those songs. Royals is such a fucking big song. I think this way, right? Because I think in terms of synchronicity and serendipity, but I've never seen anybody write about this, but it occurred to me one day, I was like, holy shit, like Lord Ella, right? She wrote Royals because, this is well known, she saw a picture of George Brett, right, in a Royals uniform, which is odd in the first place because she lived in New Zealand where they don't play baseball, but, internet and whatever. So I don't know why she happened to see that picture, but she did, and she wrote the song Royals. What happens next? The song goes number one all over the place. Number one at 7 formats in the United States, right? Insane. But number one in America at 7 formats. So the Royals, a perennial last place team, went and won the World Series. It's sort of magical if you think about it, right? Like, how does that happen? That year when it came out, they actually lost the World Series, but they went to the World Series. The next year they won the World Series. The Royals were like a joke for a long time, and so it's really interesting how, like, energetically how stuff works sometimes, you know what I mean? And I don't know how there could possibly be a connection, but on the other hand, it's maybe not a coincidence either. It's kind of fun. That's just fun to think about. I don't know, just useless information, but I like it.
I know we skipped around a little bit. So you're at Atlantic with a staple gun and Led Zeppelin posters. How does that turn into running Lava? What are the steps in between there?
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, first step was fall in love with the business. Second step was after my year at Atlantic was up, because it was a 1-year trainee program, they asked me to stay. Because I had in that year done some really cool shit. I actually designed a full-page ad for AC/DC, which was such a fun thing because I just had this. Aerosmith was my favorite band growing up. Steven Tyler was to me, the epitome of what a rock star is and should be and always will be. And
not hard to see that.
No, he's the best. So, Aerosmith had run these incredible ads when I was a kid. I'll never forget them. And maybe you remember these, like when Toys in the Attic went double platinum.
Right.
They ran the ad with an elephant. His front paws were on 2 Tonka trucks, or his front feet. I don't know what you call it with an elephant. He was standing on these 2 Tonka trucks, and the ad just said, "Toys built to last, Aerosmith double platinum." And I was like, get the fuck out of here. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And they did a number of these. So when I got to Atlantic, AC/DC was nowhere. They had 4 albums, they hadn't done anything, and then they started to break. And I fell in love with their music. I was just obsessed. I met them. Angus came to my office and gave me a guitar lesson. It was insane.
What?
Yeah, it just happened, right? It was insane.
Like, they were good enough to have been signed to Atlantic. They had put out a couple albums. They were there, but it just wasn't happening.
No, I mean, it's a miracle they were never dropped. They'd put out, Dirty D's Done Dirt Cheap. What was the first album? Was it High Voltage? I think so. And then If You Want Blood, You Got It. Oh, Let There Be Rock was the second one, I think, right? And then none of them done anything. And then Highway to Hell came out and really started to connect.
So when Highway to Hell came out, did the back catalog for them kick up too? Because all of those are classic albums. They're amazing albums. I didn't realize they weren't successes when when they originally came out.
No, they were nowhere, and it was crazy. So, and then, of course, I was just feasting on their whole catalog. And one day, someone says to me, because everybody there knew how much I loved AC/DC. So this woman, she was the head of publicity, her name was Simone. She says, AC/DC is going to be in the office today. I was like, get the fuck out of here. I'd never really met rock stars before that time. And I was like, oh my God, like my heroes are going to be here. This is incredible. So Atlantic was on the second floor. I found out AC/DC was up on the 30th floor at corporate getting their gold records. And I was like, I got to go up there. By the way, I had hair. I had a lot of hair back then. I didn't look like anybody that belonged anywhere near any corporate anything. And I was 18. So I tried to go up to the 30th floor. They shut me down. So I was like, then I heard they might be coming down the second floor. So I just stood in the reception area until they showed up. And the 5 of them came out of the elevator. They're all about 5'2", as you know. They come out and I'm like, I'm tripping, right? I'm just tripping. I'm like, this is the craziest I've ever seen, right? And I'll never forget, Phil Rudd walks up to the receptionist. He was holding the cake. They'd given him a cake and it was in a long flat box. And he's like, hey, who's going to pay for these pizzas? I got free pizzas here. I'm a pizza delivery guy. I was like, okay, this guy's fucking cool. And anyway, I followed Bon into the hallway and I started talking to him and I was like, Bon, man, it's so cool to meet you. I've always wondered what you sound like to talk because the way you sing. He's like, yeah, man. He goes, everybody thinks I sing my ass. And he puts his fingers over his nose. And he goes, anyway, mate, he goes, I got a cocaine nose and no cocaine. You go, hey? And I was like, no, but, if you want to come to my office, I'd like to fucking show you my demo tape and stuff. I actually had my demo tape in my office. I hadn't given up yet. So he came to my office. I had my guitar there. I actually played an SG Standard. And why they had given me this little office, it must have been just a spare. But anyway, he came. And then, they left and they went to the conference room and I figured I'd had my rock and roll experience, right? And then an hour later, I'm walking down the hallway and I see Angus, Malcolm, and Bon. And they're standing outside this guy Raphael's office and they're knocking on the door and I'm trying to stay out of the way. And then I hear one of them going, is Jason in there? Jason in there? And I'm like, are you looking for me? And Bon goes, hey, there's a guy right here. He's a good guy. He gave me his demo tape. He got his guitar in his office. And I was like, all right. And then next thing I know, Angus and Malcolm come tootling into my fucking office. And so Malcolm didn't hang very long, but Angus sat down, picked up the SG and just started playing. And I was like, dude, can you show me how to play Kicked in the Teeth? And he was like, yeah, mate, come here. And I was fucking he taught me Riff Raff. He taught me Kicked in the Teeth. And he was sitting right in front of a poster of him on the fucking wall. I had a Power Rangers poster on the wall. I mean, I was in the poster business, right? So I had easy access to it. Was the craziest fucking thing. And I'll never forget, too. I said to him, I've never told this story. I said to him, I go, man, Angus, I go, you're so fucking good, man. And you're so young. When did you take up playing the guitar seriously? And he goes, I never took it up seriously. And I'm like, oh, fuck me. And that's so his personality, right?
Dude, picking up my mouth off the ground. Holy shit.
I know, it was nuts. It was nuts. And so I was so inspired. And then I had this idea. I went to the head of advertising. There's a guy named George Salovich, right? He was a vice president of advertising, who in that time to me looked like a deity, right? He had a big office, a vice president. So I go to this guy's office and I go, George, I got an idea. He goes, what? I go, we should do an ad. He's like, what ad? I go, the highway to hell is paved with gold. He goes, no, we don't have money for those type of things, whatever. I was like, yeah, we could have a gold highway, and hell at the end and congratulate AC/DC and the whole shit. He's like, nah, kid, whatever, get out of here. I was like, okay, whatever. And then funny enough, when the record went platinum, they actually ran the ad. It wasn't as cool because gold is cooler than platinum, right? But nonetheless, it was cool as shit. So I actually have the ad autographed by all 5 guys at my apartment.
Your idea.
It was my idea. I got a gold record for it. It was the first gold record I ever got was Highway to Hell. I mean, a good way to fucking start, right? So anyway, so the point was, they asked me to stay after my year was up, partially based on that and some other things I'd done. And then I stayed and I went to NYU, at night pretty much and worked during the day and didn't spend much time at NYU. And then, I discovered this band Zebra, and then Zebra told me about Twisted Sister, and I made myself a real fucking pain in the ass trying to get everybody to sign Twisted Sister, which eventually obviously happened. And then my dad says to me, you know what? I was a junior in NYU, and he goes, you're better off doing one thing right than 2 things wrong. I was like, thanks, Dad. Fuck school. So I dropped out, and here I am. I mean, from there, obviously.
You signed Twisted Sister before you dropped out of school?
Twisted Sisters is an interesting story because, and I had bought their single when I was in high school at Disco Mat.
It was like early 80s, right?
Yeah, their single was, I think, Shoot 'Em Down or something, or I'll Never Grow Up Now. But I hadn't really thought about it. And then Randy says to me, Flom, he goes, Twisted Sister's the greatest live band in the world. We can't touch them. Nobody else can either. Funny enough, Zebra was opening for Twisted Sister. So I went to fucking Poughkeepsie to see Zebra, who had a record deal, opening for Twisted, who didn't have a record deal. And there were 3,000 kids there on a Wednesday night. at $6 a head.
Was that a home market or was it just what they were doing already?
No, it was like their home market. They were from Long Island, I think.
So they randomly in Poughkeepsie were selling 3,000 tickets already?
They were selling it all over the tri-state area. They're the biggest band by far. They sold out the fucking Palladium. But record companies thought they were a joke, but I didn't know that. All I knew was I went to see this show and it was out of fucking control. I mean, after Zebra and this other band, DC Star, both got polite applause, Twisted Sister comes on stage and I'm standing on the stage and 3,000 kids are erupting. And they're all wearing Twisted Sister t-shirts. And D comes out and he goes, all right, New York motherfuckers. He goes, we just got back from fucking England. We're sick and fucking tired of hearing those limeys tell us how bloody fucking good we are. He goes, what do you New York motherfuckers have to say? And all 3,000 kids throw their fists in the air and go, Twisted fucking Sister. And I was like, I'm done. I don't even care. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's it. Like, I can't wait to go fucking get back to the office. So I went back to the office. I got 2 hours of sleep. I walked into Doug Morris's office. I was probably on God knows what. I walk into Doug Morris's office and I go, I found religion last night. And he goes, what the fuck are you talking about? I go, Twisted Sister. He goes, get the fuck out of my office. And by the way, go home. And I was like, oh, really? And then I didn't know that they were considered a joke in the industry. I went that night to South Jersey to the Fountain Casino where they had 3,700 kids there. And I was like, this is the greatest shit ever. So long story short, Doug shut me down at every turn. He hated them. Everybody hated them. I had elder statesmen in the business putting their arm around me. I remember one time in the lobby saying, kid, you're off to a good start with the Zebra band, went gold, whatever. Like, stop with this Twisted. You're making a joke out of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, everybody knows they're a joke. I was like, a joke? It's a good fucking joke. So what eventually happened was I saw Phil Carson in the hallway. And Phil Carson was a legend. I mean, he was the head of the English company. He's the guy who I knew he signed AC/DC, back to that again, and Yes, and other legendary bands. And I went up to him. He didn't know me. And I handed him a cassette of Twisted Sister and a bunch of information. He told me later he threw the whole thing in the garbage because he didn't know who the fuck I was. But then, coincidentally, he happened to go see them. Oh, they opened in England for, I think, Foreigner.
Without a record deal.
Yeah. And Phil was there and he calls me up the next day and goes, this is the greatest thing I saw since I saw AC/DC the first time. I'm signing them. I was like, great. What are we going to do about America? Because by now, like, there was no hope because they were just hated. And he was like, I'll get the U.S. company to put the record out. And he did. And then to Doug's credit, I mean, he hated them. But the first record came out like a fucking CIA agent. Nobody worked it. Nobody paid any attention to it. But it sold 100,000 copies anyway because the band toured relentlessly. And then Doug came to see me and he said, you know what? You were right. Band's fucking great. And you know what? We're going to break them. And then he got Tom Werman to do the next record. He got Marty Callner to do those incredible videos. And of course, the next record sold 6 million copies. So that's when I dropped out of school.
Not bad.
Not bad, right? Yeah. Anyway, so long story short, I ended up in rehab. The next act I signed was Fiona. She had a hit, so I was 3 for 3. I ended up in rehab because, I had more money and, those days it was definitely a crazy time to be in the music industry. So got out of rehab in 87 and White Lion had made their album while I was in rehab. I'd signed White Lion. And that album came out so bad. The album was great, but it wasn't doing anything at all. And then one radio station started playing it. There was only one station in the country playing it. Station in Minneapolis, KJJO. Great rock market. Yeah, it was a new station. So I guess they were looking for a way to differentiate themselves against the market leader, which I think was KDWB at the time. And so they had found this record that they liked and they started playing it. So I called the record stores, which had been my job when I was first coming up. They would let me do like research, like A&R research, very, very primitive, crude form of it. I called the store in Minneapolis, just figured I was like, hey, kind of sheepishly, I was like, is anybody looking for that White Lion record? And that guy goes, dude, what are you, stupid? He goes, that's our number one selling record. I was like, no. I go, not White Snake, White Lion. And he's like, dude, I'm telling you, we need more. We had 25 on Monday. We sold out. It's Wednesday. He goes, where can I get more? I was like, holy shit, like that's crazy, right? And then I called the next store and the guy was like, oh yeah, ever since they started playing it, that thing's top 10 for us. I was like, one store after the other. So that's the magic, right? That's like I said, the 1 to 10 thing. It wasn't a 10, but it was pretty high up there. So I walked into Doug's office and I was like, Doug, what the fuck? And he goes, holy shit, let's make a video. We're going to break this band. And then sure enough, that album went on to sell a couple million. And then after them, I signed Skid Row. And
so is that the power of MTV? One station was big enough to get him to make a video. And then once the video was there,
well, no, I think you're getting the chicken and the egg mixed up. I mean, MTV was at the height of its power. But the fact was that Doug was the guy who really invented or perfected the idea that you could study how a record reacts and then figure out how to spend your marketing dollars based on that. He taught me when I was very young, well, really young. He's like, the public's opinion is way more important than yours. They know what's a hit, right? So I used that, right? That's what the Twisted Sister thing was to me. Like I was just looking at the public's reaction. I like the music too. I love the music actually. But with White Lion, the one market proved it. it proved it was a hit. Because people are the same everywhere, pretty much. If it's a hit in Minneapolis, it's going to be a hit in fucking, Dallas. I mean, like, why not? It's magic. And records either have magic or they don't. And when they don't, it sucks. I mean, I've had those experiences too, obviously, and it sucks. It's really frustrating. But when it works, it's really a thrill. And so anyway, I had this great run at that time. I signed Tori Amos. Still one of the most proud signings I've ever had. It was out of character because I was this rock guy, but I just thought she was great. And she made that unbelievable album, Little Earthquakes, which has had many lives in my life. That album has had such a crazy amount of significance in my life. And then ultimately, how Lava started was, I was running the A&R department when Tom Carolyn found Stone Temple Pilots and flew out there and we signed them. So many other great bands back then. I mean, everything from Escape Club, which was almost silly, but was still a hit. I mean, I just had a lot of hits back then. I'm forgetting some of them. No offense to anyone who might be listening who was in one of those bands. But anyway, then music started to change. Rock music, there was this perception that this indie sound was coming in, that like North Carolina sound, whatever, Super Chunk and all these bands were like the big, everyone wanted to sign those bands. And I think that Atlantic thought I wasn't the right guy to run the A&R department anymore. So they decided they would sort of move me aside, right? They didn't want to get rid of me, but they moved me aside. So Doug comes to me and he says, I want you to start a label. I want you to start up Atco Records again. And I was like, Atco Records? That sounds old to me.
It's like Badco, right?
No, Badco was on Swan Song. But Atco had some great acts back in the day, but, it sounded old. So I was like, can I just name it myself? He's like, sure. So I came up with the name Lava because it's hot. And it destroys everything in its path and sounds like love. It means clean in Spanish. I was like, and also this was the era when the CDs were coming in. And I was like, you want a short name. So you have a long name, you're not gonna be able to see it all shrunk down. So had no fucking idea what I was doing. There's that saying, fake it till you make it. I mean, they gave me a very small budget, 3 people on staff, no acts. I think it was really set up to fail, but that's not what happened. It ended up catching fire. I mean, we went from Edwin McCain was one of the first signings, and Jill Sobule and Civ, and they all had some sort of hits.
Jill Sobule, that's I Just Kissed a Girl.
I Kissed a Girl. It's funny. I've had 2 hits with songs called I Kissed a Girl.
That Fabio was in that video. I remember that.
Yeah, so ironic.
I remember the South by Southwest Atlantic party where she played that.
Yeah, that was a great song. She's super talented. Hi, Jill, if you're listening. But then along came Sugar Ray, who I actually scooped up from Atlantic. They were dropping them, and I was like, I want them. And, of course, Fly became that monster hit. And then Matchbox 20, then a guy named Kim Stevens, who was a promotion guy working at Atlantic, he had brought me Collective Soul when I was running the A&R department, which we signed. Of course, had huge hits. He also found Edwin McCain. And then he brought me Matchbox 20. They were called Tabitha's Secret back then.
They're the same band.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he sent me this Tabitha's Secret. It was a 4-song CD. And I remember I listened to it. I called him up. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. And he goes, go listen to that 3 a.m. song again. I was like, all right. So I listened to it again. I said, all right, let's go see him. So we flew down to Tallahassee, I think. And we saw them play. It wasn't great. I mean, they had 2 different guitar players back then. It was not great at all. But Rob was Rob, and the songs were amazing. And his voice was amazing. And so we signed him. And, that album sold 16 million copies. It might be more by now. I mean, it was fucking crazy. And then along comes, I signed the Corrs around that time, which was, people don't know it as well here, but they sold 35 million albums between their various releases, like all over the world.
A little bit more artsy.
Crazy, like crazy. So the Corrs was great. And then along came Kid Rock. And that was really one of the most fun and important records of my career. Oh, I forgot to mention Trans-Siberian Orchestra because I'd signed them when I was on Atlantic and took them with me. Well, I sort of created it with Paul O'Neill.
The thing just continues to grow.
I mean, it's crazy. It's like
Nick Karras was involved too early, right?
He was.
Talk about a team. That's a cool package.
It's hard to think of more fun that you could have in the music industry than breaking Kid Rock. But Trans-Siberian Orchestra is another one because it just didn't make any fucking sense. We took a metal band, which was called Savatage, put them in tuxedos, and had them play Christmas music. And there's a reason why that all came about. It relates back to what I was saying before. But everybody thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Like, what the fuck?
Huge production, awesome arena rock shows, full family hanging.
So I really had to break that record by myself. Both of them, pretty much. I mean, with Kid Rock, I had Lee Trink, who was a huge help, who's now his manager, who was the product manager, and Angelica Cobb, who was the publicist. But other than Andy Karp, who found Kid Rock, who's my A&R guy, who brought it to me. He also found Simple Plan, which we signed back then, Uncle Cracker. Then he found Skillet, which we signed. I mean, we were on such a crazy roll at Lava back then. And the company by now had expanded. We were growing, the staff. And we were selling so many records that I actually put, the debt clock down in like Union Square?
Yeah.
For people that don't live in New York, there's a clock there which just counts the national debt. And there's another one with cigarette deaths, right? Where it just keeps...
Massive number that just can't be comprehended.
It's like, what's that called? It's a display, like a lighted display where the numbers just keep going up and up faster than you can count. So I put one of those in the lobby. I put a lava sign with one of those things, and it said like number of records sold or customers served or whatever it was, and it just kept going and going because we were just fucking shit up. I mean, it was crazy. So ultimately, I sold the company to Atlantic, and then they asked me to be chairman of the company that I had grown up at. It was almost 25 years to the day of the time I had walked in, and they gave me a staple gun and some double-sided tape, and they were like, hey, do you want to be chairman and CEO? I was like, okay, this is weird. Like, you know what the funny thing is? Like, my first reaction, I don't remember if I said it out loud or not, but my first reaction was, wow, do I get to decide if it's a snow day? Like, it felt very grown up. You know, I was like, really? Like, chairman, like, are you guys sure about this? This is weird. I'm still that same stupid kid that walked in here at 18 years old. And like, of course I took the job. I mean, who wouldn't?
That's part of, I think, your success is you've always had a boyish quality where you've never taken yourself over seriously. You've got that lighthearted playfulness with it, too.
Yeah, you're right about that. No one's ever accused me of taking myself too seriously, I don't think. I mean, maybe that's why I have this whole other side of my life and, you know, with the criminal justice stuff, because I do actually have a serious side, but it doesn't show itself in the music business. I mean, I get real serious when it comes to breaking an act. I always try to have fun and try to do things with some pizzazz, you know? Some of my favorite things are and you can't see them on the radio, but the ad we ran when Kid Rock went platinum, where it was just his middle finger and then comma 000, comma 000. That ad actually ran directly opposite the Christian radio charts in Billboard, which was kind of a nice juxtaposition. And then
did you do that intentionally, or that just happened?
No, it just happened. And then, you know, of course, when it went to 10 million, we just moved the finger over and added a 0. But then, you know, but the same thing was true when I ran the 44-year-old Virgin ad. You know, when I went from Atlantic to Virgin, at the time, the hottest movie in the country was the 40-year-old Virgin. His photo, that poster was everywhere. It was iconic, right? So I was like, fuck this. I'm not going to run a normal announcement. Jason Flom, the chairman and CEO. I'm going to take a picture as him and run that shit. So I did, and it came out great. And it really set the tone for Virgin, because Virgin, you know, the Virgin experience was really fun. I mean, Atlantic was fun too, don't get me wrong, but it was hard because Leora and I clashed a lot. And I signed Paramore at that time, which I'm really proud of. But nonetheless, Virgin was fun because it was so cold when I got there. I mean, it was the worst label in the business. They should have actually probably closed the fucking thing. It was hemorrhaging money. They hadn't broken an act in eons. It was just a disaster. And it was so fun because of that, because we turned that shit around real quick.
It's an amazing path that you've had through your career. Before I let you go, can you talk about how the industry has changed, but yet you guys have continued to break records regardless of how radio has changed and labels have changed and the products have changed, how that evolving and how you've worked through that?
You know, what hasn't changed is magic, right? It's magic. If you're lucky enough to bump into, you know, an artist with that amazing ability, and at the end of the day, it's all about the artist, right? I mean, we're here to service them. It's their talent. It still takes a team and it takes a real push. By the way, I just reminded myself of an incredible story. I saw David Geffen introduced Amit one time at an event. And David is, to me, he's like a deity. I mean, the guy is like, he's so next level. So, of course, I was hanging on every word. And David introduced Amit, and he told the story about how when he was a kid in the business, he said to Amit one day, he said, Amit, I want to become a big success like you. Like, can you give me any advice? And Amit goes, hey, kid, walk around with your head down. Maybe you'll bump into a genius. It's fucking incredible. I hope that story is true, but it doesn't even matter. It's so good. So, and to hear David tell it, of course, is magical. But what hasn't changed is if you can find great artists and you can put a serious effort behind it, it'll still work. And, you know, the business will always change. It'll always evolve. What'll never change is that people always want new talent, and the best talent always wins. I mean, that's what happens. Like, I totally believe that the cream rises to the top. On the margins, I mean, there's always records that could have been lost. And some of them are, you know, records that I worked on, like even Jewel. Like, that one took a huge push. Or Tory. I mean, Tory, that one didn't need to break. That was a crazy record. Took a huge push. But then there's some that just go, you know, bam, and they're gone. And you're lucky to find one of those once in a while. Then, you know, you get to keep working in this business. And by the way, I've got one right now with this band, Greta Van Fleet.
Killing it. Aaron Frank's manager and great team at William Morris behind it. Thing seems to be playing all the festivals and selling out all the shows. They're just crashing those numbers.
It's so fun because of the fact that they're bringing rock and roll back. You know what I mean? It's like, for me, it's so full circle. Growing up, having gone to see Led Zeppelin at Madison Square Garden and worshiping them as any rational teenager did back then, it's just so fun to be a part of bringing that feeling back and seeing people react the way they are, because it's fucking incredible. I mean, they're incredible. Like, his voice is batshit crazy, and they're great. It's fun, and it's no nonsense. It's like they write 100% of the songs. There's no effects. They're just killing it. You know, I'm really lucky to be a part of it.
I want to thank you so much for taking time and joining us on the podcast. This is just awesome, dude.
Yeah, man. What the fuck? Don't get yourself arrested, but if you do, at least you know who to call.
Jason is a role model for all of us. We can all do more, and he's a perfect example. Thrilled that he was able to join us on the podcast. You can check out his podcast as well, Wrongful Conviction with Jason Flom, on Revolver Podcast Network. So stoked that he was able to join us.
Rob Hallett from Robo Magic on Promoter 101.
It's that time of the week, Dan. We got to go into some Promoter 101 tweets of the week. Would you take a second for us and talk about what was going through your brain when you wrote these tweets? And let's start with this one, Dan, because it's the 20th anniversary of Spice World, when an agent is on his 5th minute trying to explain the Spice Girls tribute band.
Yeah, that's going to be a pass.
And this one, Dan, this is going to be a house divided tweet, I think. When Tom Brady turns you into an Eagles fan.
E-A-G-L-E-S. Fuck you, Tom Brady.
I thought you were going to say Eggles or something like that, Dan, as the Philadelphians do.
Is that the correct nomenclature there, Mr. Pierce?
It is. It's Eggles and Wooder. So if you're from Philly, you order your cheesesteaks wit or without.
I believe it's wit or without. Wit.
Wit or wit it out. And you say Eggles and you go down the shore, Dan. This is coming from a kid who spent the high school years in Philly.
I'm kind of a Geno's guy myself, Luke. What about you?
I'm also a Geno's guy. I'm actually really more of a Steve's Princess Steaks guys for any Philly listeners out there, including Jesse Lundy from Point Entertainment. Not the chop guy. No Pats for me. No Gems for me. This is like Geno's or Steve's. That's the way to go.
Last time we were in town, me and Zink ate it both so we could do the side-by-side comparison, and so conveniently located that you can do that. By the way, anyone that knows Jesse Lundy, can I please explain to me why he's changed his name into Facebook to something obscure? I'm very confused by this. Anyway, Philadelphia time. We'll deal with it later.
How about this one, Dan? We got one more to go here. Can somebody explain this to me? The concept behind not answering calls, then calling right back and saying, I just missed a call from this number. Not talking about the people that just do this as a single call. I'm talking about people that do this as a policy. Is it a power move? Or do they just like the awkward moment of maybe I called you? Who's this?
Yeah, I don't get the behavior. And I know a lot of people had many different responses to this, including John Finberg saying he has to pay for the call if you call him internationally, but he can call you back for free. So that I got. That kind of made sense. But I seem to see a lot of people that just never answer their phone, but then call right back. I don't get it.
And that'll do it for Promoter 101 Tweets of the Week. Make sure you keep up with Dan on Twitter. He's at The Jew. And if you have your own Promoter 101 thoughts, feel free to tweet them at us or email them over. Anything that makes Dan and I laugh are going to get used on the air.
And anything that you want to send, like Tom Brady memes of him like getting beat up or anything, like totally welcome.
Hey, this is Mike Luganbill,
Lenore Kinder,
Tony Conway,
Joe Atamian,
Nick Gold,
Jay Williams, Adam Voith.
You're listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
This week, we've got an epic war story from DSW's Entertainment, David Simone. He's the manager to Piano Guys, Wilson Phillips, and a partner in Primary Wave Publishing.
What can you tell us about your history that entertains us backstage at a story?
You know, there are a lot of stories. I've been very fortunate to have a long career and worked with many, many, many artists. And there are a lot of different war stories. But one of my favorites is I became head of A&R at Geffen Records around 1999 when Guns N' Roses had basically split up, and Axl was Guns N' Roses, and he had been making an album for, I think, 6 years.
Was this Chinese Democracy?
Eventually. They've spent $6 million on it. So obviously the first job that I'm given by Eddie Rosenblatt is you've got to get to know Axl Rose, and we've got to get this record finished. So I said, absolutely, fantastic. What could be better? So I get in touch with Axl's manager at the time, good guy, and he says, look, Axl only works at night, starts at Rumbo in the middle of wherever in South Central LA, a rough area, and he comes in between 2 and 3 a.m. So I said, look, I don't really mind that. That's fine. So when can I come down? So he says, well, let me talk to Axl and then I'll get back to you. About a week later, the phone goes in my office. I pick up the phone. Hi, it's Axl Rose. Wow. Hi. That's cool. I hear you want to come down and hear some music. I'd love to. Be the greatest thing in the world. You know, big fan, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, we need to go through something first. I said, okay, what's that? He said, do you have children? I said, yeah, I have 2 children. I have a daughter and a son. And how old are they? 12 and 8. So he says, well, I need pictures of them. I said, I don't understand. You need photographs of my kids?
It's a little bit like working with a drug cartel, right?
Yeah. So I said, well, what do you need the photos for? Well, I need to show them to my shaman so she can tell me whether your children have the devil in them. So I said, I'll make it very easy for you, Axel. I can absolutely confirm to you that they have the devil in them. And after that, Axel said, okay, you can come down to the studio. And I went down to the studio, and the rest is the album took another 8 years to finish. But I did confirm to me that my children had the devil in them.
I didn't see this going that way.
That wasn't the Axl Rose story you expected, was it?
No, hookers and blow and midgets.
But I think mine's original. Come on.
I've never heard that story.
Yep.
You caught me off guard with that completely, David. Points to you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
This is what a manager does. Anything it takes to make an artist happy. Well done, David. And I got to say, throwing your kids right in the line of fire just to make a client happy, that's great management.
You're listening to Promoter 101. This is Martin Atkins from Public Image, Killing Joke, Ministry, 9 Inch Nails. I got a Grammy, a big face. Fuck off.
We're joined next by legendary agent from the Agency of Performing Arts, that's APA's Mr. Andy Summers. He's worked from everything from Social Distortion to Brian Wilson. He is on a level by himself and one of the kindest people you'll find, Mr. Andy Summers.
Thank you so much for taking time.
Always happy to be here with you, Dan.
We'll do the history in a minute, but let's just talk about the hit list. Pennywise, Social Distortion, Bowling for Soup, The Monkees, Brian Wilson. Who else am I missing?
Probably a bunch of good stuff that I've represented that I no longer represent. Circle Jerks.
You do still represent even though they don't work, right?
Even though they are in hibernation. Off, which is Keith's band, as well as Keith does Flag, which, as you know, he's the original lead singer of Black Flag. And so with other members that partook in Black Flag over that band's period of time, they put together Flag and debuted it at Golden Voice's 30th anniversary in Santa Monica. And that turned into a tour in like 2011. And I think we did some dates in 2013 or 14 and a few festivals. And that's it. Maybe they're going to unleash some more Flag this year as well. And Keith is busy preparing Off's new music.
Of the pop punk genre, if you don't rep them now, you probably rep them at some point. I mean, you still have GBH.
Yeah, well, GBH I wouldn't call pop punk. These are just classic punk rock bands. I'd call them pop bands if they ever charted when they were fresh and new, but these are underground legendary bands.
You found cool before cool was cool. Some of those bands have been huge. Some of them have been big, were big again.
Like any act, it's about the longevity of your career, how long you last, ups and downs. That's life. Marketplace, things change. And you know what? Any of those bands, like GBH, at one time could sell out 2 nights at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. Now, between Orange County and Los Angeles, we play anywhere between 15 and 2,000 capacity. GBH's career started in the early mid-'80s. And that punk rock audience doesn't come out as often as they did at one time. They're grown-ups now. They don't act the way they used to. And GBH really hasn't resonated with the young punk rock audience because they're grandfathers.
Your signings over the years have been all over the map. Folk, punk rock, new rock, ska punk.
Speed metal.
Yeah, like Flotsam and Jetsam at one point, right?
Megadeth, Testament, Celtic Frost, King Diamond.
Proclaimers.
And the Proclaimers.
Brian Wilson, the Monkees. To connect the line from somehow to get from Unwritten Law to Brian Wilson is an amazing curve. Or from Green Day back to the Monkees. And yet somehow all of these acts have come through your door.
Well, I like a lot of kinds of music. I think I understand a lot of kinds of music. I don't like opera. Never liked opera. But I've always liked the more traditional sounding country music or rock bands from 30 years ago that played country music that were more rock bands as opposed to active rock bands singing about beer and things like that, which is what country music is now.
As a career agent, the band that's probably most recognizable tied to your name is Social Distortion, I would think.
Could be. Yeah.
Over the last 3 decades, they've worked continually the most.
They have worked continually. They have longevity. They put out very few records. Lead singer's an icon to most people. You know, whatever level they got to in their career, sustained. It just sustains. And it's a good time for people. And people love the band, and I love the band. And it's a good business to be in, and it's especially a good place to be for a music fan like me.
So there's no rhyme or reason to what Andy Summers will sign.
There's a rhyme and a reason, especially now.
But to go from the Monkees to GBH is a hard run. That's a big ballpark you're signing in.
I've always loved Monkees records, and I always loved the TV show. And I loved Michael Nesmith's solo records. After the Monkees ended, those early country rock records. So, you know, when the opportunity for Bruce and I to represent
Bruce Solar.
Yeah. And the first tour we did was just Mickey Dolenz, Peter Tork, and Davy Jones. And it went really, really well. It was an opportunity we jumped on, and it was fun. A lot of big hit songs and really well-written songs. Performed great.
Now, let's go back. Let's talk about the early days, because you came up, did the college route, graduated, did the mailroom thing.
Well, I got out of school, wanted to be in the entertainment field, and I couldn't get a job. So I literally was working at a coffee factory in Moonachie, New Jersey. You know, and my job was to walk up and down the line and make sure that the people who worked there weren't putting too much coffee in the bags, that they were measuring perfectly. It was not what I aspired to do. I was going to keep looking for something to do. I was going into the city, going to see bands at CBGBs and, you know, listening to records. You know, I had a big record collection and listened to a lot of music. And fortunately, my cousin was an assistant in the personnel department at William Morris Agency in New York.
That's lucky.
I was lucky. And you know what? She got me an interview. I got in, and I was in the mailroom there.
You did the traditional route of college, mailroom, training all the way up through a major agency and getting on someone's desk.
Right.
Which, by the book, is probably the way you would be told to do it if you had the ideal everything worked perfectly.
Yeah. You know, I learned the mechanics of what we do. I ran around with other assistants there that were music freaks, and it was all good. I mean, the company was a little bit, you know, on the corporate side, etc. Things changed, and literally I was out of there within 4 months of them saying I'm an agent.
You went through the training point where you were an assistant and then you were promoted to agent. You made it all the way from mailroom to agent.
Yeah. And I knew I was going to get fired.
Did you leave before you got fired?
No, I was broke. If you leave before you get fired, you leave. If you get fired, you leave and they give you a check. So knowing at the time I was having conversations at the time with Ian Copeland and John Huey over at FBI, I knew I had a place I could go. At the time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be an agent, but I had to go someplace. So at that time, I went to FBI, where I really only stayed for about 2 or 3 months. I had 2 clients. I had Was Not Was, and I had Mink DeVille. I came to a point where maybe I don't want to be an agent. I just wasn't sure, and I was young. I could bide my time and make decisions. I also didn't know if I was really any good at it. So at any rate, I went into business with a partner of mine, a guy who had been in the mailroom with me, and we started a little management company. So we were managing a couple of bands in the city. We were booking a few acts just for cash flow and did that for about 3 or 4 years, but I just didn't think that it was going to go anywhere. And then when Frank Riley decided to start venture booking and left Bob Singerman's operation, a good friend of mine, Arnie Broger, who had been an agent at Variety Artists, called me up and said, "Hey, will you come in here and help us book some bands?"
That's what Frank was doing before Triad?
He opened Venture Booking. We were all in New York. He started his own company after leaving Bob Singerman's company. So I went into Bob Singerman's company with Arnie Broger, and Bob and Arnie and I formed an agency called Talent Resource. And soon after that, we moved uptown, and basically, Bob was doing a management thing. He is a manager. And Arnie and I built an agency. Arnie was signing these great blues acts. Coco Taylor, Albert Collins, Sun Seals. He signed Suzanne Vega. At the time, Dean Brownrout came into work for us. And the lawyer we rented our space from was also the lawyer for Roadrunner Records, which was a big metal record company based in Amsterdam. He was very plugged into this speed metal scene. And I had gone and seen Venom and Slayer and seen Metallica without being a natural metal guy. I went to school on it because I loved the energy. I saw some punk rock in it. And through the lawyer who we were renting our space from, I got to meet various metal people, etc. All of a sudden, I'm in the Megadeth business. I'm in the Slayer business and all of that.
Well, that was right when that stuff was just starting to happen.
Yeah,
right?
and it was great. It was exciting times, and these were really good bands. I liked the fact that it wasn't mainstream, because I just felt that being our own little agency, guys in a little office, we're not going to compete with ICM and William Morris, the big agent, and Premier Talent. We're not going to be able to compete with that. Those guys are plugged into the major labels. It was the mid-'80s. It was a time of record label excess, major schmoozing going on and all of that. And I just knew I couldn't compete with that. It's just not my thing. I gravitated towards signing things that were underground, that like didn't have to go to radio, didn't have to be on a major label, that we could build live, because I built a circuit. I knew where I could put these bands to play. I knew the right independent promoters that would get it. I knew a lot of the major promoters that liked me and some that wouldn't pick up my calls or believe in it. I just let that flow.
You've done the tour. You did the William Morris. You did the FBI. You did Bandwagon on your own. You were at ICM. Then you were at the agency group for a very long time. Bandwagon again in between.
No, I did Bandwagon in New York. The thing with Arnie turned into Bandwagon by myself. Then I did a deal where I went back to FBI at the end of the 80s. Then I moved to California in 1990, and I worked at Triad for 2 years before ICM. After ICM, I started Bandwagon when I got the call from Steve Martin, we're going to open up the agency group in California. And we talked about it, and I did it. And, you know, it was me and Val Wolf and Melody King, and from the New York office of the agency group, Dave Kirby and Andrew Goodfriend. And that was day one of the agency group in California.
Not a bad team to start with.
It was fun. It was new. I mean, I had my team. I had Val and Melody.
And you grew that to be a massive office.
It grew to a big office. And, you know, within, I think, 2 months after we opened is when Steve brought Bruce Solar in.
Bruce moved down from San Francisco to join the team.
Right. And he, once again, everyone at the agency group was entrepreneurial. We had all had our own little boutique agencies. Bruce had Absolute Artists. Yeah, and Bruce and I didn't really know each other that well at all. That we turned into such a good team was pretty organic.
So Solar's there, you're there, and this lasted a good long time. This wasn't a 5-minute run.
It was 14 years for me.
14 years, and then you and Steve, almost within a couple of months of each other, both left and wound up at APA.
Correct.
Since the agency group was bought by UTA, a lot of you guys have wound up back together again.
Well, before the agency group got sold, Bruce joined us at APA. But right after it got sold, we were lucky enough that Guy Richard came over. You know, and there was a few other people, you know, Seth Rappaport in New York had come before that happened. So, you know, there's a few of us that like all worked together at the agency group. Steve Ferguson, who I worked with at FBI and ICM, and he worked at the agency group in New York at a time before I did. He recently joined us, or within the last year. He joined us after he left Paradigm.
And now the Canadian UTA office closed, and you guys wound up picking up some of the bigger weight there.
Well, Jack and Ralph built the agency group's Toronto office.
Jack Ross and Ralph James.
They built it, competed against the biggest agency up there, and turned out to turn their office into the biggest agency up there.
So UTA decides they want to be out of the Canadian business for whatever reason.
Right.
Within seconds, everyone else in the industry that lives in touring is clamoring for these guys because these guys know the music business and everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no shortage of homes for any of these guys to go wherever they wanted to go.
Yeah, I would think so.
So Paradigm won out. You guys won out. Live Nation won out because Zed is now running Dubai.
Right.
Amazing. But I guess if you speak as many languages as him and have an international spirit.
No, yeah. Good for him. He's going to do great.
Clearly, UTA was in a different point of thought than everyone else in the industry when it came to the value of that office.
Yeah, well, everyone can have their own thoughts. You know what? Look, it ended up happening. And we were lucky enough that Ralph James and Jack Ross, who had been our partners at the agency group for all those years that I was there, and friends of ours, it was great that Jim Gosnell and Steve Martin went up there and were able to make this deal.
Well, let's talk about that. Jim Gosnell is the head of APA.
Yeah.
Steve seems to be the de facto head of music at this point, but Jim is a music guy, He's a music agency, and he's the head of a major agency as a music guy. And I think that may be the only case that has a film and TV and music department where the music guy oversees everything.
Jim played in bands.
He's an honest-to-God music guy.
Yeah, he is.
At the same time, the growth that him and Steve have brought to that company. Agency has been nominated the last couple of years. Clearly, the industry sees that you guys are a major agency and are on the move and are a top 5, top 6 agency. You guys changed the face of APA.
I appreciate you saying that, but I think it's everybody involved that changed it. I just showed up. I don't know that I changed it. I add to it.
Well, and there's other good things going on. Andrew Ellis and some of his guys have got a serious cool factor going on in the New York office.
Once again, Andrew and Andrew had his own thing. You've got APA, which is a traditional agency that always ran in the traditional way that the agency business ran. And you have a bunch of us agents there that are all entrepreneurs. Like I said, I used to type contracts on a typewriter out of my apartment, typing Voivod contracts.
Good rock band.
Very ahead of their time, for sure. Andrew Ellis built himself a great business, loyal client base, and he came from an independent background, as well as the young guys over there in that office.
From agency to agency to agency, it may change how you feel personally about your work environment. Does it change how you sell shows? I mean, at the end of the day, you're selling an act to the other guy on the phone, regardless of where your desk is, right?
Yeah, you know what? Every agent, individual, represents a client base. And every agent has their own style of how they represent their client base. My style hasn't changed. My goals haven't changed. My knowledge changes based on the various places I've worked and the different personalities I've worked with and the different people who all have different levels of knowledge. I gain what I learn from them. And hopefully, for them, the way I do things, I'm bringing something to the table.
Well, let's talk about that. You bringing something to the table. You have one of my favorite quotes in the history of the business. People get scared of their assistants learning too much and surpassing them. I hope if I did a good job as a mentor that they become a bigger agent than I am, because then I did my job.
Yeah, I've said that, but I didn't make that one up. I will credit that one to a chairlift ride at Aspen Live at some point in the last 10 years. And that was Wayne Forte, who was one of my mentors. I'm not saying I surpassed him, but I've done well. And, Wayne was a mentor for me very early on.
He's always had a band that was hot on his roster, if not many. He has been relevant in this industry for 45 plus years.
Whatever artist he's representing at any given time is getting real quality representation.
So you've mentored a lot of agents. I mean, at the agency group, even if they weren't on your desk coming up, you oversaw them and got to mentor a lot of young agents coming up. But in general, the people that are on your desk, you have the most chance to influence as they become agents.
Yeah, I would think so.
So let's talk about some of those people that had been on your desk. I mean, obviously, Brian Greenbaum has become one of the biggest agents in the world.
Yeah, Brian, a really good friend of mine, a really good agent. I think probably some of my style, but I think Brian went to CAA and really excelled way beyond anything I could have done for him. I like to think I played a major part in that. But I think others were involved, and also specifically him. He's that good.
Okay, so Green Bean. Val Wolf, obviously.
Val, actually, we were at ICM. Val actually started out on Green Bean's desk after he got promoted to agent. Then when Brian left, Val came over to my desk. And then when I left ICM to start Bandwagon, Val came with me.
Okay, and around the same time, Medina Salati was on your desk.
Yeah, Medina, Gabe Apodaca at the agency
Melody
group.
King.
Melody, Emilio, who's over at UTA still, was on my desk for a bit. But these guys have all sat on other people's desks. So you build your thing by absorbing from the various desks you're on.
Our career paths have been intertangled for the better part of 27 years or so. There are a number of us, Sean Striegel, Michael Belkin, a handful of guys around the country that you have been very good to, that make your X priorities, and you've made them a priority. And you've got a network of these people around the country. What is it that you look for when you're finding someone to become part of your team?
Look, here's the thing. You see how crowded the marketplace is. Let's look at it this way. Let's say you're the promoter in Denver, like you used to be, okay? And you still do promote in Denver, right?
Quite a bit.
Okay. So in Denver, you've got like all these venues, and most of these venues have shows almost every night. Busy market, lots of shows, 4 or 5 promoters doing these 73 shows that are going to play in Denver in the month of October. And I know who all the promoters are, But I also know that's 73 shows that these 5 promoters are talking to 15, 16 agents to build these shows. That's a lot of shows. Therefore, for me, my job is to represent my act. I'm going to be very careful as to who's going to promote my show, who's going to make my show a priority, because my bands expect me to speak to the promoters and to pick the guy who's going to prioritize them. Not for any reason to the detriment of all these other shows that are playing. If they all do great, I'm happy. But my job is to make sure my shows do great and that my artists do great. So I know which promoters I can absolutely count on, which promoters care about me enough to show the extra care for the clients I represent. 9 out of 10 times, I'm pleased with the results. I can't buy the tickets. I'm the first guy to admit if something doesn't do business, I'm not the guy who says, you didn't promote. If you didn't promote, I'm that guy who's going to say that. But also sometimes you have to realize, you know what, you did a good job and enough people all knew about the show and made the decision not to come. But I want that conversation to happen as few times as possible. Because 9 out of 10 times I do believe that the acts, when I'm selling them, are going to do the business if a proper job is done promoting them.
Do you have any advice for agents coming up?
Be meticulous and learn, and be passionate about the music you represent, and hopefully the managers and the artists, etc., are people that you enjoy being in business with. Sometimes you're in business with people you don't enjoy being in business with. It's business. And there was a time when I could not afford to not be in business with people who I didn't really want to be in business with. It was good business. You got to hope that like you're really enjoying the people you're around, whether it's the artist's music, and the day-to-day dealings with the artist. Be good people.
Andy, thank you so much for taking time.
Thanks for having me on Promoter 101.
Just listen to Andy. It's clear why we named him the 2017 Badass of the Year. Congratulations, Andy, once again. We love you.
Hey, it's Elliot Lefko, promoter from Golden Voice in Los Angeles on Promoter 101.
Celebrating birthdays the week of January 26th to February 1st, 2018 in the year of our Lord.
On Friday the 26th, we're going to wish a happy birthday to Vince Bannon, Scott Morrill, and Maria Bruner.
Hey, Saturday, Derek Beckman from Concert Concepts in Denver, Colorado, and AC's Brian Benson.
On Sunday, wishing a happy birthday to Stephanie Hansen and Stephen Brush.
Monday, the 29th, Bend, Oregon's Tower Theater, Ray Sully, Nathan Rose Stone from the Home Free crew that we love and adore so much, Dave Rowell, and Joy Hart out there in Boise, Idaho.
On Tuesday, we're giving a shout out to the Vandals, Joe Escalante, Live Nation's Claire Tully, and KWVA's Charlotte Legg.
Wednesday, APA's Andrew Buck, concert promoter to the stars in the beautiful land of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Brian Drusky. Second generation promoter from AEG, Jesse Stoll. High Roads, Brian Jonas. And venue manager excellent in the Bay, Mr. Eric Bresler.
And finally, on Thursday, let's wish a happy birthday to Tommy Merrill, Eric Hoffman, and Jeff Kicklighter.
Happy birthday to everyone from the gang at Promoter 101. And Luke, what's your gang color for Promoter 101? I mean, red's taken, yellow's taken. What color do you think we'd be? More like a teal?
Yeah, probably teal or turquoise or like some like highlighter yellow, I think. You know, something ridiculous in the 80s.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA, Promoter 101 Podcast.
If you want to reach out to us, send an email to Steiny@promoter101.net.
This week's quote of the week comes from Victor Hugo. Music expresses that which cannot be said and on which it is impossible to be silent. Deep.
We'll be back next week on episode 68 of Promoter 101 with WME's Peter Schwartz, Queen of Atlanta rival entertainment's Lucy Lawler Frias, and a new war story from Dan Smalls Presents, Mr. Dan Smalls.
Hey, until then, we want to wish everybody sold out shows for the weeks to come. Cheers.
This is Lee Anderson from Paradigm, and you're listening to Promoter 101 The Podcast.
Ba-da-ba-ba.